Welcome, everybody. We are back. I'm very excited that we will be launching our webinar series again. Today, we have a very popular topic, our best yet attended webinar, and I think it's timely. It's a webinar about vaccines, and that's hopefully why you're here today. If you would like other webinars in the future, please let us know topics you're interested in. There'll be more to come. We've had all sorts of webinars in the past, ranging from topics about weight loss and how to set health goals, to diabetes management, to mental health, and more. So lots of great topics in the past, but if there's anything you'd like to see in the future, let us know. Today's session is being recorded. We will be posting it online. Please leave your microphone muted. And if you want to participate and ask a question, please unmute your microphone or use the chat feature. So make sure at the bottom of your screen or at the top of your screen, that little microphone button, click that mute button and make sure that that's there. Also keep your video off so that we can post it and protect your privacy as well. So a couple announcements before I turn it over to Dr. Hammond. Thank you, Dr. Hammond, for joining us today. He is well researched and educated on this topic, so we are in store for a lot to learn. Let me go ahead and click the next screen here. So a couple announcements. We are now offering vasectomies. And for those of you who may know me, I am back from maternity leave. And so it's very funny and fit that I got to make a poster about vasectomies today. I found that a little bit ironic. But Dr. Petty is able to do those at our clinic. So if you're interested, he does consultations if you have questions, and then it is covered by most insurance plans. The other announcement we have is I have a group health coaching class called HealthWise that will be starting January 25th from 4 to 5 on Mondays. It goes for 8 weeks and they're 1-hour sessions and it's all virtual, and it's 8 sessions for $89. And it's a small group of about 10 or so, very personalized to the group and what your questions and your needs are. So if you have New Year's resolution goals that you want to get started on, or you need some accountability and support from peers, as well as a health coach being myself, would love to have you in my class. Feel free to email me for more information, Stacy@westminstermedicalclinic.com, or call the clinic and we can get you set up on the schedule to participate in class, which starts just in a week and a half or so. Another announcement we have is our Patient Advisory Council. This is a group of patients who come together once a month and advise the clinic on policies and procedures and education for fellow patients. They do a lot of different things for our clinic. Right now, they actually have a winter drive that's going on. You might have seen information about collecting items for our community, and that's one of the projects the Patient Advisory Council has taken on and spearheaded for the past couple years. If you are interested in the Patient Advisory Council, please email PAC@westminstermedicalclinic.com and we can get you more information. And if you're looking for ways to volunteer and be part of our community, we'd love to have you. And right now, all these sessions our meetings are all virtual, so we are doing it in a safe way. And once we can meet in person again, it's a pretty fun group, and we enjoy our monthly meetings. So as I mentioned, we have all our webinars posted online. So to listen to this webinar again or to access previous recordings, go to our website. It's going to be under the forms and resources page to health education. And you'll see all the past webinars as well as this one will probably be posted in about a week or so. We'll be sending you a survey probably about tomorrow. And if you have any feedback on this session, we'd love to hear it. And we want feedback in general. If you like our clinic or love our clinic or think we're doing a good job, please post an online review. It's what keeps our doors open so that we can continue to serve our community. Facebook, Google, Yelp, wherever you like posting reviews, we'd love to get some positive reviews out there so we can continue to offer the services that we offer at our clinic. And I will tell you, if you aren't happy with our clinic, let us know so we can do something about it. We would love to hear from you with whatever feedback you have, and we can work with you to make it right if there is something that is wrong. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over. But thank you for being here, Dr. Hammond, and just give me one moment here while I get my slides up. I don't know if you want to kickstart off here.
First of all, I guess most of you or all of you know that I no longer am practicing as a primary care physician, but I am still seeing patients as a medical consultant. So I am seeing patients, complex cases where I use what they call functional medicine and personalized medicine, trying to find the cause of the problem or the disease. And instead of treating the symptoms or the results of the disease. And so that's something you can discuss with your PCP, and I take referrals, and it's a pretty involved process, but that's what I'm doing now. I'm also doing shared care planning for those who want that. We can discuss that in the Q&A if there is time. The subject tonight is going to be COVID-19. It's going to be really quite broad. I think the intent is, are they safe? As now, pretty soon, you're going to be making a decision of whether you want to get the vaccine, and there is some hesitancy. So I wanted to give you really well thought out, well researched, the most cutting edge information, believing that people make the best decisions for themselves and their health when they are well informed. And so I'm going to be talking about a lot of the concerns and myths of this vaccine in detail, the vaccine itself, what it is, how it works, a new vaccine that's coming, how this whole process happened, and even some of the parts of how vaccines are developed, so you understand the complexity and the comprehensiveness of this really miraculous event that we got a vaccine in 1 year and how that happened. So next slide, please. So many of these slides came from the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, so I'd like to thank them for letting me just take them, and without permission, but I'm sure it's public domain. Next slide, please. So these are the concerns, and some of them I would call myths, and maybe they're your concerns, and maybe you'll walk away understanding they're a myth. These are what I believe after a great, my thoughts are going to be my opinions from my research, and of course you'll have to make your own. But some people are thinking, well, I've already had COVID-19, so that means I can skip getting vaccinated. Others will say, if I get the vaccine, do I have to wear a mask? The vaccine itself will make me sick with a live version. The mRNA vaccines will change my DNA. I already had a flu shot, so I don't need the COVID shot. The COVID vaccine has a microchip in it that's used to track people and control them. I'll talk about that in detail. mRNA vaccines were made from fetal tissue. The side effects of COVID vaccine cause more people to die than actually get it. And then there are the racial and ethnic groups who are concerned about being used as guinea pigs, from some previous horrendous experiments that happened many decades ago. And the vaccines were made too fast to be safe. So I will address each one of these tonight. But if you have other concerns or you heard other things that you want to discuss, please write them down now so you don't forget, so that we can bring them up in the Q&A. Next slide. So these are the 3 approved vaccines. You've, of course, heard about the Moderna and Pfizer vaccine. I marked in yellow the highlights. Those are mRNA vaccines, standing for messenger RNA vaccine, and they are now approved in 9 countries. There is another vaccine, and I'll talk briefly on it. It's an adenoviral vector vaccine from AstraZeneca Oxford, which is a British-Swedish company. And it was released last month, and it's been approved in the UK and India. And this is also the vaccine type that is used in Russia. Next slide. So again, I'm just going to talk on the yellow highlights here because there's a lot of information, and I have a lot of things to get through. But we're going to just compare a bit the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine, because that's what you're going to have an option in the next couple of months, hopefully. And these were studied in 41,000 people for Pfizer and 25,000 people, and Moderna went through the trials. So really over 70,000 people were in the trials. This data is from November 30th, and things have changed a little bit. And you've all heard how effective they are, 94, 95% effective. Now, the Pfizer vaccine is effective about 52% after the first dose. And so it really requires that second dose to hit the 95%. Moderna, a little bit better, a lot better, actually, 90% effective after the first dose, and then 95% after the second dose. A lot of the need for that second dose is to improve the duration of the efficacy of the vaccine. The amount of antibodies that you get after the second dose just go through the roof, and they last a long time. If you don't have that second dose, you may have an inadequate supply of antibodies to last very long. And the side effects, that's what everyone wants to know about. Now, these are pretty much the side effects that kind of ruin your day or keep you from going to work, kind of keep you, interfere with your daily activities. So not just a little bit being tired, I mean, really, really tired. And so fatigue is the biggest side effect, and more with the Moderna vaccine that has more side effects. But still, 90+% of people do not have much in the way of significant side effects. And they're mostly the same type of stuff you would get from the flu: headaches and muscle aches, and maybe some redness and swelling at the site of the injection. There were 4 cases of Bell's palsy. These were decided that these were not caused by, which is a facial paralysis that usually goes away. But these were felt after further review to be consistent with just what the population would have, and not caused by the vaccine. Next slide. Now, these were the side effects that happened during the trials, and I'll talk a little bit in a bit about the side effects that happened after the trials. But there were no serious allergic reactions during the trials or any serious adverse effects. It was a really very wide demographic. About a quarter of the people were over 65, so a nice sampling of older people, which was really very effective. And a good sampling of of ethnic and racial groups. About 40, if you include the international studies, about 40% of the people in the trials were either Black, Hispanic, or Native American, or other ethnicities. And about 17% had very high risk conditions. So they did test people with diabetes and heart disease and hypertension and obesity and things like that. So they did have a pretty good sampling of the population. Next slide, please. Now, if you look at all the side effects, you can count on probably feeling something, which is good because that means the vaccine is working. But this is all of the side effects. So yes, pain at the injection site. Most people get a little pain at the injection site. Now, that may be at the time of the injection, and maybe after the injection. I had my vaccine a few weeks ago, and my arm got sore about maybe 5-6 hours after the vaccine, and it actually got a little bit swollen. So I was in that 10%, a little bit red and swollen. So I was in that 10% range there. But a lot of people are just tired. They get a little headache. They get muscle aches. Some people get chills. And this is your body responding to the vaccine. It's not that you have COVID. It's just that your immune system is responding, and you have these symptoms. But these are very mild and don't usually interfere with your daily activities, except for that, perhaps in regards to the fatigue. Between 3 and 9% people were fatigued enough that they kind of stayed home for a day or two. Next slide. Now, all vaccines and all medicines, for that matter, have with monitoring after they are released. And Pfizer is, of course, conducting their observational studies after the vaccine has been released, looking for adverse effects, any deaths, hospitalizations, severe COVID, to again understand, really how effective is it, how long does it last, all these questions that we have. And then what happens with pregnant folks or healthcare workers and people with certain conditions, what happens there, so they continue to gather data. Now, in addition, there is a vaccine adverse reporting system, VAERS, and that's something that you may not be aware, that your physicians are required to report any adverse effects when they give you a vaccine, so that the government and the pharmaceutical companies, can continue to monitor this. And so we report administration errors, serious side effects, and in this case, any cases of COVID-19 resulting in hospitalization, death, or multi-system inflammatory syndromes. Now, It's amazing. I updated this slide 2 days ago. Now over 9 million vaccines have been given. And in the first 2 to 3 weeks, there were about 2 million vaccines given by Pfizer. And so in this post-vaccine monitoring, there are 4,393 adverse effects, about 2.3% of people getting the shots. And this is where they found 21 cases of anaphylaxis, which is a severe allergic reaction, and where you can swell up and get hives and have difficulty breathing and things like that. All those people were treated, sent home. There were no deaths or any serious complications from this. So this is an example of, I think, the safety of this vaccine, where it's so far 99.77% of people do quite fine. Next slide. So vaccine concerns. The side effects of COVID-19 will cause more people to die than actually get sick. And so I might as well let myself get the COVID. And of course, that's not true. No one has died from the vaccine. Well, many more than 300,000 people have died from COVID. So I think the numbers speak for themselves. And in fact, no one has had a serious life-threatening side effect at this point. So I think we can negate that concern. Racial ethnic groups and the elderly are being used as guinea pigs. Well, no. 40% of the trials were with ethnic groups, which is important because you need to see how that works on people, and making sure that they were not going to have any side effects that others Caucasians would have. And so this has not been an experiment on racial and ethnic groups, as you can see in the demographics that we went through. And all that information is public, is very transparent and available to the public on who they tested. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about mRNA and how it works, because again, you need to understand. I think that takes away a lot of the fear and just the frightening nature of these vaccines. And to begin with, what is RNA? RNA is a molecule, and it's made by the DNA. So the DNA is, for many different reasons, decides that it needs to make a protein or some enzyme. And so then it will create a code in the RNA that then goes out into the cell, into this sort of a protein factory. And then the RNA, creates that protein. That protein then gets delivered out to the rest of the body through many other mechanisms. So what they were in that RNA is maybe 3 molecules, kind of 3 amino or nucleotides, what they call them, which are kind of strung together, and then they don't last very long. They're made for a specific purpose, so they're usually dissolved within minutes, hours, and maybe a day or two at the most. But most of them are very temporary messages, and maybe 5,000 or more are really floating around making proteins at any given time. So how this vaccine was made was this technology, actually mRNA was discovered in 1960, and they were working on it as a pharmaceutical agent for many, many, many years since then. And there was a big breakthrough in 1990 in terms of being able to give it to animals, because it did cause reactions, allergic reactions. But they were able to encapsulate it with a fatty layer. And so an envelope of fats around the RNA through a nanoparticle technology. And they were then able to start doing a lot of research on how to deliver different drugs and vaccines, and been working on this since 1990 through animal models. And in fact, and I'll touch on this later, there are other vaccines already made with mRNA technology that just didn't come to market, probably for monetary reasons. So the mRNA is now in this fatty envelope and is taken up by the cell. The mRNA is released. It goes to that protein factory and then makes the protein. And in this case, it's the protein of the COVID surface spike. And that's what attaches to your cells to enter your cells. It's called the spike protein. So They took the gene of that spike protein and they coded it as the RNA so that your body is making the COVID spike protein and that releases into your bloodstream. And then you develop an immune response to that protein and then you become immune against COVID. And again, it's only one piece of the COVID virus so that you are making. It's not the whole COVID virus. And so there's maybe 25 genes or proteins in the COVID virus, and this is just one of the surface proteins that has been coded for your body to make. Next slide. So again, this is just the breakthrough, and I suspect this lady from Hungary will get the Nobel Prize for this. And she discovered how to encapsulate this with particles. And there's actually 20 different medications that use this technology already. So this nanotechnology with lipid envelopes is not new. Next slide, please. Now, real briefly, this vaccine has not yet been approved in this country, although it probably will be in the next month or two. This is the one in India and the UK. And this is a viral vector vaccine. And this is also the Russian Sputnik 5 vaccine. And what this is basically a cold virus called adenovirus. And they took a chimpanzee cold virus and they modified it and activated it so it couldn't multiply inside you and cause any kind of illness. And they attached that spike protein gene to this cold virus. Next slide. So it's an incredible genetic technology, but it is actually not that hard to do. And so here you see that little virus. It gets taken up by the cell. It then sort of goes to the nucleus there and it injects its DNA into your nucleus, and then then that DNA makes RNA, just like the mRNA of that spike protein that goes out into the cell, goes to the protein machinery area, and makes the spike protein. And again, this virus is not able to interact with your DNA. It also is unable to replicate in your cell, so you cannot get sick, and eventually goes away as well. And has been developed, actually has been tried in humans before with the Ebola virus, which was approved and on the market. Next slide. So the question is, do you need to take the second dose? And I briefly mentioned, yes, you only get a partial antibody response after the first dose. And the big issue is, how long will this vaccine last? If you don't get the second dose, it's unlikely to last very long, because that second dose is where you get exponential amount of antibody formation. Next slide, please. So vaccine concerns, I've already had the COVID-19, so it means I can skip getting vaccinated. Well, no, and there's several reasons for that. One is you don't know if getting COVID-19 that you've developed antibodies to protect you for a second infection. And there have been cases of people getting COVID twice. Because just because you develop antibodies doesn't mean that they are what they call neutralizing antibodies that protect you. You can develop antibodies to different parts of COVID. And if they're not to the surface protein that attaches to your cells, they're not going to be effective. And so that's one issue. The second issue is you don't know how good an antibody response you had with your infection. Was it a mild infection, moderate infection? How long will those antibodies last? So it's highly recommended that 3 months after you had COVID-19 that you get vaccinated. Why 3 months? Is if you have antibodies, you don't want to impede the effectiveness of the vaccine. So you need to wait 3 months for your antibodies to kind of wane, so then you can have a good response. After I get the COVID-19 vaccine, I won't need to wear a mask. No, it looks like we are not going to have, well, there's again a number of reasons for that. You can still get COVID. It's only 95% effective, so 5% of people will get it. And also, we don't know whether you can kind of be infected with COVID and not get sick, but still spread it. So that data is not available. But I also think it would cause chaos if some people, and I think in our country has proven that that community responsibility is a flip of the coin. And so, people saying, well, I got the vaccine. Well, did they really get the vaccine? Who's got masks on? Who doesn't? You can be uncomfortable. I think it causes chaos. So, best to wear the mask until we get herd immunity, which unfortunately will not happen this year. The vaccine can make me sick because it's a live version. That's not possible because it's only one protein of the virus, as I mentioned, and it requires 25 different proteins to make a live virus. It will change my DNA. That's not possible. That's not how physiology works and genetics works and RNA. There are other RNA viruses out there that can get into your DNA. There are different kinds of viruses, really. So it's confusing. Messenger RNA is a different variety. It does not ever become integrated with DNA. But that can be confusing because there are viral RNAs out there that can infect you, but mRNA is different. I already had the flu shot, so I don't need to get the COVID shot. And again, influenza is a completely different virus, and the COVID vaccine and the flu shot has no protection against the COVID-19 infection. Next slide. So I wanted to talk about a little bit of how vaccines are made, because I think people's imagination can run wild sometimes and come up with some ideas that really aren't true. And the FDA must approve all vaccines, determine if they're safe, and do what they are meant to do. And they take this very seriously, looking at every step of the process, from the research to the trials to the manufacturing process. And when they get about 10,000 page reports they have to go over to approve these medications and vaccines. It's not a little deal. That's sometimes why it takes so long. And in this case, there's a first, of course, pharmaceutical company gets an idea. They play around with it. They see if it makes sense to do. Is there going to be a business model for it? Is it something that's going to work? Is it the physiology right? And they test it on animals. And that has been done for since 1990, 30 years on the mRNA vaccines. There's a lot of animal studies on this. And then when you graduate the animal studies, hey, this makes sense for the company to move forward. Let's test it on some humans and see if it's safe. And that's stage one, and that they usually do it on less than 100 people. In this case, Pfizer combined stage one and stage two at the same time. And so in stage two, you find out if the vaccine actually works. And so they condensed that time by doing both of those at the same time with 456 people. Moderna had 600. And then in stage three, they go to thousands of people to really see how effective this thing is and continue safety studies and whatnot. And this is where you got the 70,000 people in the trial, half of which got the vaccine, half did not. And then you go to stage four, which is a post release monitoring. So that's how a vaccine goes. And one of the reasons why they were able to go pretty quickly is that all along the way, they were in touch with the FDA. And so usually they kind of do this more sequential. They'll do stage one, send it to the FDA, comes back, they go to stage two. Well, all along the way, the pharmaceutical companies were talking to other pharmaceutical companies and the FDA in real time. And that really condensed a lot of the time and actually helped with a lot of the, getting around a lot of manufacturing barriers and whatnot. Next slide, please. So again, how can it be so fast? They did a lot of this work. The clinical trials were done like all clinical trials are done in the past. That stage three was not altered. It's the way it's done in every medication vaccine release. What was a little bit different was that they were able to condense the front end and the back end. This is a national, or this is a world crisis. They didn't think about whether this needed to be done. Was it going to make them money? Does it make good sense to put their efforts into this? It was, they put the whole company's effort into doing this. Not just part of the company, the whole company's effort, at least Pfizer case, to get this vaccine out because of the critical natures of how the pandemic was affecting the world. So they also started manufacturing at the time of the beginning of stage 1. Now, nobody does that because you don't know if you can even get to stage 2. So, but they gambled that this was going to have this, well, the government supported some companies. Pfizer took the gamble and just made 100 million vaccines and said they would get paid if it worked. Other companies used government support. So that government support really accelerated this process and brought it to phase 1 immediately. Because that kind of pre-phase 1 time can take years before people really have enough data to say that they want to go forward with the billions of dollars of expense to bring something to market. The information sharing was remarkable. There was no delay in recruitment. There was a long list of people who wanted to sign up right away. This virus is easy to make. It only takes a couple of weeks. And once you have the genetic code, you can make it very quickly in the laboratory, where other viruses, vaccines need to be grown in a cell culture. And I'm not going to get into how they make those vaccines, but they have to grow it. It has to be live, and they have to kill it and get some protein. That's a long process, and they didn't have to do that with mRNA. Technology of delivering RNAs with the lipid nanoparticles has been going on for a long time, and they already had vaccines in place. There's already an mRNA vaccine for Zika, influenza, rabies, and cytomegalovirus. It just has not been brought to market, but the research had been done. And again, I think a lot of that was they just didn't see it was more of a business model issue, whether they would make a profit or not. And Zika kind of died out. Next slide. So why is it taking so long to get all vaccine to the people? And again, just to show you a little bit of how the government works, this is Colorado State Department's COVID plan. They had to put the committee together. Now, again, this is a big project. They did not have any federal support. So the states are having to deal with their own staff and their own budgets. And they were overwhelmed with the immensity of this project, which is a shame. But they are wonderful people doing the best that they can. And so they had a planning committee. They did preparedness exercises. They worked with the Colorado Immunization Information System to say, how do we allocate? How do we order? How do we distribute the vaccine? How do we administer it? How do we get the second dose reminders out there? And how do we monitor safety? And so they came up with this phased approach, which most states did, which all states did. And they then decided that they identified their high-risk populations who they wanted to get the vaccines out to first. And then they had to figure out, okay, who's going to give these vaccines and how do we recruit these people? And so we got an invitation back in October or so, maybe earlier, I think it was earlier, probably in July, August, whether we wanted to, give vaccines, and we sent our reply back. So what's the capacity to get this vaccine out, and who's capable of doing it? Well, we don't have a super, freezer that costs $20,000. So we can't give Pfizer vaccines, but we can give Moderna vaccines. Not yet. Anyway, how do you communicate all this to everybody? So it's a big task. Next project, next slide. And these are the people involved. And I just throw this out there just to show there were a lot of eyes on this project, and from a lot of, really very smart people, very honest people, very ethical people. Next slide. So it wasn't just the State Department coming up with these ideas. They collaborated quite a bit. Next slide. And they came up with this allocation. And how do they do it? With these three organizations, including a committee from the governor, what's fair, what's transparent, what's our duty, how are we going to save the most lives? I mean, there were a lot of thoughts and questions that went into who gets the vaccine first. Next slide, please. And again, this is, you may have seen this. This is their phase 1, 2, and 3, depending on whether you're a frontline worker or you're a high risk person. And so we're pretty much through the ones, getting into, I think, the twos. And of course, things are changing as, these new variants of the virus are coming on board. Next slide, please. So the COVID-19 vaccine has a microchip in it used to track people, which is interesting. I laughed when I saw this, but I said, no, don't take it seriously. And so anything is possible in this world. But where this came from was that Bill Gates does a lot of humanitarian work, and he spends millions of dollars giving vaccines out in Africa. And there was an issue of, well, there's no real good medical records in Africa. And so how do you know who got the vaccine? So they kind of talked about this idea of putting dye, not a microchip, but dye in a vaccine, so that when someone came up, you could put an infrared light on it and see if they had a dot, and that means that they had the shot already, and they don't need to get another shot. And that was in discussion that never went forward, that never was researched, but apparently someone had an imagination and took that idea and ran with it. So I think that's where this myth came from. And mRNA vaccines come from fetal tissue. We know they are made synthetically in the laboratory, and I'm not even sure you could get them from fetal tissue. You can't really get them out of human bodies. Next slide, please. So what's the attitude out there? Looks like about, again, this is about a month old data, and it said 66% of people in Colorado, in the country said that they would get a vaccine. A third did not, and there's some differences. Again, mostly, this is Colorado data. White Coloradoans, about 70%. Again, the Black and Hispanics are a little bit more hesitant. Men are more likely to get it than women. And those who said they would get the vaccine, it's about 50% said they get it right away, and half of them said they would probably wait. That's more even between the ethnicities and gender. But what's interesting is when we polled the Colorado family physicians in November, 95% said they would take the vaccine as soon as it was available. Next slide. So why not get vaccinated? Well, I took some of the myths or the concerns, and then I, wanted to, so I've talked about them already, some of them, but I'll go through them again. Not tested enough. I think that, we now have essentially 9 million people who've been tested. No deaths, no serious adverse effects. We've had animal experiments since 1990. The vaccine, mRNA vaccines have already been tested on humans with other diseases, rabies, cytomegaloinfluenza, and Zika. So this is not a new idea, and it's been around and it has been tested. Side effects and long-term effects. Yeah, that's a big concern. We don't know the long-term effects. I mean, that is possible. But the preliminary data is really encouraging. There's just been 21 people had serious allergic reactions, no doubt, but they were all treated and no one had any harm from them. Again, the vaccine contains just fats and sugar, no preservatives, no latex. And so hard to know what they're allergic to. It may be that in that vaccine, perhaps some of the RNA is not encapsulated totally by the fatty layer, would be my guess. And it cannot get into your DNA. General concerns about vaccination, that's real. And then, people, you're putting something into your body, and I get that. Although vaccines have been around for centuries, since the 1700s, and proven safe. And all the medical miracles out there, vaccines have probably saved more lives than any other medical innovation. And part of this concern came back, and it's been around a long time, but it really exploded with Dr. Wakefield, who kind of linked measles vaccine with autism. And it turns out that it was a completely fraudulent claim, and he actually released false data and eventually lost his license. That caused a lot of damage and a lot of concern and a lot of fear. This link required 20 years of research to prove without any doubt that there is no link between measles vaccine and autism. and many, many, many studies over this 20-year period of time. So, but it caused a lot of damage, and people get things in their mind, and it's hard to undo that. So measles is back, and around the world, 200,000 children die a year from measles, a million cases. And so that's one of what you see on the internet is a lot of great things about the internet, a lot of bad things about the internet. And when it comes to medical information, there is just a lot of nonsense out there. And so be very careful of what you believe, and make sure it's a source that you trust. Political beliefs, that'd be an interesting discussion. And I think it really comes down to, one's individual freedoms versus community responsibility. And, again, that's your beliefs, but if this is a pretty big problem. And I think if you are of the belief that you're your brother's keeper, then taking the vaccine would be the way to go. It was too rushed. I think I spent a lot of time on how it really was not. It was just very efficient. Okay, it wasn't rushed at all. It was just shows you that when industry is unleashed to do something ethical, it's for the better good, and we can really do amazing things. So it wasn't rushed. It was just showing the best of what we can do. And next slide, please. So this is a really blurry slide. I apologize, but basically there are no contraindications to the vaccine except one, which is that you are allergic to the vaccine. So you don't know unless you got the first vaccine. If you have bad response, anaphylaxis, don't get the second. Other than that, all the medical societies are recommending vaccines for everybody, even if you have allergies, just have to talk to your doc, even if you're pregnant, even if you have autoimmune disease. So, it is a discussion you should have to understand the pros and cons, but there are no contraindications other than allergy to the vaccine itself. Next slide. So why get vaccinated? Well, vaccines must be proven to be safe and effective before they're given to people, and the COVID-19 vaccine is no different. The best scientists in the world are working to save the world, and many of these companies are not doing this for any profit. They're doing it at cost. And the vaccine is your gateway back to a normal life, which we all desperately want. And we are in this together. 59% of the virus is spread by people who have no symptoms. Half of those people never get symptoms. They're silent spreaders. So, you just don't know if you're that person, and so we have to get vaccinated. There's just no two ways around it. Protect yourself. Okay, 78% of people over 50 had heart damage. And this is people who had mild, moderate, not people who were in the hospital, but all comers. This is a bad disease. And it's not the mortality of this disease, which is going to be the tragedy. And I'll talk about that in a moment. Protect my family, of course, and then let's end this pandemic and get our lives back. Next slide. So my biggest concern, because I'll tell you, the doctors, the hospital doctors have been doing a great job, and they really cut down the death rate. And people still die, but not as many as the beginning. But there are syndromes that you get. Now, of course, if you're in the ICU and you get intubated with a tube down your throat, you don't come out the same. You have brain fog, you have lost muscle weakness. It takes years, and sometimes you never really fully recover. So they call it the post-intensive care syndrome, and it's a real serious matter. It really is destructive to be, when you're that sick, you have a lot of damage done. But also it causes a chronic fatigue syndrome, and that people that's real and can really mess up your life. My biggest concern is the organ damage. There are just many studies showing that even people with mild disease have significant organ damage to the brain, to the heart, to the lungs, to the kidneys. And when will this show up? So back in 1918, with the Spanish flu, people survived. But lo and behold, 50 years later, there was this big surge of Parkinson's disease. And they actually correlated back to the 1918 flu. That was actually causal for Parkinson's disease 50 years later. And then there's the long-term COVID long haulers and people who just don't recover. And that goes on and on and on. And we're still trying to figure that out. Next slide. So mutations, I just threw this in because you're hearing about that a lot. And I just wanted to mention this. Why is this important? Well, the mutations you can expect. These viruses, they evolve. They're gonna want to be able to survive. We select out the best virus for transmission. So you would expect this to happen, and they're happening in every country. And there was just a report out with a new virus that just was discovered that originated in this country. But why is this important? Well, let's just say this UK virus that has a 50% higher transmission rate. Why is that important? Well, the current COVID vaccine has a reproduction rate of 1.1, which means each person who has the infection gives it to 1.1 other people. And that equates out to 129 deaths in a month. A 50% increase in transmission brings that rate to like 1.5, 1.6, but that ends up with the exponential growth of just people meeting people, is a 978 deaths. That's why people are very fearful of this new mutation. It's not more deadly, it just spreads more and you have more death. Next slide. So the unknowns, how long does it last? Don't know. Is it effective in other populations with HIV and autoimmune disease? Probably, don't know. Effective in pediatrics and pregnancy? Don't know. Effective if you were previously infected with COVID? Don't know. Is it effective in preventing people asymptomatic infections? Don't know. Is it effective from keeping you from getting long-term effects from being infected? Do not know. And is it effective against new mutations? Probably yes. There's been some studies on that. The spike proteins have not changed in these mutations, and so there's no reason to believe that the vaccines will not work. But we don't have studies on that, but the laboratory research would suggest that it's not a problem. Next slide. So we practice what we preach. Here's Westminster Medical Clinic getting vaccinated a couple of weeks ago at National Jewish, and there's Jan and Sue and Glenna and Karen and Dr. V and Aubrey and Caitlin, Stacy and Kellen, Dr. Haglund. So and many more. We believe in this, and we got vaccinated. Next slide. So where can you get the vaccine, and who can get it? It could have been done better. I do not know. I mean, you can call this Colorado Help 1-877-462-2911. And these websites tell you, where the vaccines are available. There are going to be hospitals and safety net clinics like Salud and Camp Encina. I can't remember the first name. So if you're 70 years old and above, I think you can call that number and find a hospital, Kaiser or Centura, that actually you can sign up for the vaccine. I think they're talking about lowering that down to 65, but I have not heard that. We're in the same boat as you. I mean, we don't know. I struggle to find all this the data. We're not in the loop. I mean, we have to struggle to find this. And but we do not have the vaccine yet. But when we get the vaccine, we'll let you know. And we're in the list for the State Department to that we're willing to give it. But the State Department has not given us any information on when that's going to be and what vaccine or whatever. So I think Kaylin may have some list or something for our Westminster area, but I'm not sure if she has that available. But that's it for me. I hope I didn't go too long. I was hoping to leave some time for Q&A, but and I have no